Hi, this is Katherine reporting for Kids First. Today, I'm joined with my team member Sahiba to interview Dr. Barry Sandrew, a member of the Board of Advisors at Immersive Hollywood, which is a section of Digital Hollywood, and he is a Harvard MGH neuroscientist. Dr. Sandrew is an internationally recognized expert in digital imaging and visual effects pioneer. He has over 33 patents and decades of feature film and TV accomplishments, including productions for all the major Hollywood studios, TV networks, and several cable networks.
In 2000, Dr. Sandrew established the first and longest operating VFX studio in India. He produced all-color compositing and VFX for Spielberg's first digital animated feature, We're Back, A Dinosaur Story, VFX for Scorsese's The Aviator, HBO's Entourage, and oversaw creative and technical teams in 3D conversion of Alice in Wonderland, the Shrek trilogy, and so much more. So it's a pleasure to have you with us here today, Barry.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And, as Katherine and I were just saying, you've had an absolutely fascinating career, but it all began with neuroscience. So how has your PhD in neuroscience impacted your visual effects and digital imaging career?
Yeah, that's a question everybody asks me. You know, I was very fortunate in being involved with several technical fields that were in their pioneering stages when I entered them. I had no idea they were in their pioneering stages, but that's where they were. And it was easier to create a mark in those fields at that stage. And I'm talking about neuroscience, medical imaging, and feature filmmaking. A good portion of my work in neuroscience involved medical imaging. And this was during, again, the pioneering days when medicine was just discovering the value of digital imaging through the use of MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging, PET scans, positron emission tomography, and CT, computerized tomography scans. This was all new stuff. Today it's commonplace. But much of what I learned from my work in medical imaging, I applied to my early work in movie making. Indeed, how we perceive patterns has been studied to improve the diagnostic value of medical imaging for many, many years, for many decades, as a matter of fact. And one of the primary parameters in medicine has been the introduction of color, which effectively adds unique resolution to the diagnostic process. And that's one of the things that I was very involved with, and really how I got into colorization originally. You see, visual effects, including colorization and 3D in movies, are nothing but illusions. You know that. In order to make those illusions effective and appear natural, even if you're creating fantasy or sci-fi where images are not necessarily natural, they're not supposed to be natural, it's important to understand the neuroscience of the human visual system and how we perceive the world. This is most true in 3D. Our stereoscopic vision, because of our two eyes, is something that's very forgiving in most cases because of monocular cues. We can see 3D with one eye. There are a lot of cues like texture and a whole bunch of other things that give you 3D cues. But sometimes 3D will not be forgiving. There are in other words, there are limitations to how much 3D you can push. If you push the 3D too far and put it into the audience to the point where it's hitting the back of the theater, you can make people sick or tired. So watching watching 3D in a movie theater is a very unnatural thing. It's not like how our visual system normally works. If I put my finger up in front of me and I use one eye and then the other eye, it jumps. That's because each eye is looking at a different perspective of my finger. But in a movie theater, there's not one thing there. Basically, all you're looking at is the movie screen. Everything you're seeing, whether it's behind you or in front of you, all the way in infinity, it's all on that screen, and your eyes are not converging. In fact, you can't converge. So you're basically taking your visual system apart and creating 3D, and that's not. A lot of people can't handle that. So you really have to do it in a very, very specific way. And I studied that from a neuroscience perspective to make it work. You need to create 3D that enhances a story without being uncomfortable. So neuroscience really was effective in, it really helped me in 3D, in developing 3D, but also in color as well, because color perception also has a major neuroscience base.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
So you have over 33 patents, which involve a lot of new ways of looking at things. So what do you attribute your creativity to, or new perspective, as it relates to these patents and all the things that you've pioneered?
Well, I think it requires looking at the world with a unique perspective. That is, seeing things that are obvious to you that are not necessarily obvious to other people. And I don't know if that's learned. I don't know if it's or whether you're born with it, to be very frank with you. But all my patents came from my entrepreneurial career. There was another advantage neuroscience in my early entrepreneurial career. When I started out in neuroscience, again, it was in the early days. When I got my doctorate, by the way, there was no neuroscience department at Stony Brook University. There was a biology department and there was a psychology department. And the psychology department was into physiological psychology, and I had to actually cross between the two disciplines. So that's how early it was that I actually got into it. When I got into neuroscience, there were no tools. Today you can buy books that have catalogs that have all of these tools for studying neuroscience. There was nothing like that. I had to borrow from other disciplines and make things work to study the brain. It was very much true with colorization in Hollywood. Hollywood was not digital at all. It was still analog. Digital in Hollywood didn't happen in the year 2000. So I had to improvise and invent tools to colorize black and white movies that didn't exist. They existed in other disciplines, but I had to bring them in. So anyway, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it did. And so at what point in your career did you realize that this was like a unique skill of yours?
Well, I think that happened when I started to write scientific grants and scientific papers. I realized that I had a knack for creative writing. Creative writing is very important in science. You're not making things up, but obviously, when you actually make a discovery, it's important for you to be able to look where that discovery is going and how it's going to be used and what implications it has and that sort of thing. And of course, you want to make it as profound as possible. I had what I consider a unique insight into problems and their solutions. The same was true in solving problems in filmmaking. When a bunch of entrepreneurs came to me and asked me to invent a process for colorizing black and white movies, well, I drew from all of the work I had been doing in medical imaging and digital medical imaging, and believe it or not, the solution came to me instantly. If somebody else who didn't have all the experience that I had in digital medical imaging, again, which was very new, would not have the same perspective. So I was able to instantly figure that out. The same was true with 3D. When I invented the process for converting movies from 2D to 3D, that solution came to me pretty much instantly.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And so you were mentioning your sort of career with colorization as well. And I noticed that you invented colorization, but then you went back and reinvented it. So what drove you to better your previous inventions?
Well, when I colorized black and white movies initially, once again, I have to go back to the fact that digital Hollywood had not happened. Digital Hollywood is a term that came about in 2000. In 1987, when I left Harvard to invent colorization, there had never been a movie that was fully digitized. In other words, you could not put one onto a CD or something of that nature. you could put it on a laser disc in analog form, but you couldn't really put it on a disc. Not that there were many discs then to be used anyway. I don't know if we even had floppies back then. But you don't even know what a floppy is, do you? But so I used a lot of these crude techniques to create colorization. But in 2000, when I decided to redo it, there were much more powerful computers. I didn't even have a network back in '87. There were no networks. There were no PC networks that you could use. So everything had to be sneaker netted. We had to take Bernoulli discs, which were a type of medium that was very crude today, but back then it was really advanced, and we had to basically walk it over to the different people working on them, and they'd put one disc in, and they'd see what was going on. They'd work on it, take that disc out, put it somewhere else. Networks didn't exist. So in 2000, again, there were more powerful computers. There was image processing technology that was very advanced that I could use. It was much more efficient, and the quality was much better. Not only that, but when I originally colorized, I did it in standard definition, which was low resolution. In 2000, I was able to colorize in high definition. So I was able to get a lot more out of it, and it looked much more realistic.
That's amazing how much, technology changes just in a matter of a few years.
Yeah, seriously.
So you've started a lot of companies and led a lot of projects. So what are some of the most important qualities in people that you look for when you're building teams?
Well, I have two answers for that, really, because the qualities I looked for a long time ago are different than what I would look for now. But frankly, the studios that I've opened, I've had 4 studios. I like to hire young people who were interested in art. And I used to get a lot of students that graduated from the Art Institute here in San Diego. They had an interest in getting into show business and the entertainment business, but their chances of getting into the entertainment business were slim to none because it's very competitive. And the technology that I invented for colorization for 3D was very simplistic. In other words, I wanted to create an interface, a user interface that I could train somebody in a couple of days to do. I could train somebody in a day to do. What that meant is, what I did was I brought them in, and within 2 weeks, they were working on first-run feature films. Can you imagine that in San Diego? You graduate from a vocational school, the Art Institute, and within 2 weeks, you're working on a Spider-Man or a Man of Steel or The Walk or any of these great movies by famous directors. And what I wanted to find were people who understood that this was a stepping stone.
That's so awesome that you've started so many people's jobs in such important things. And yeah, good listeners are very important because I guess once you're a good listener, pretty much always a good listener.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not only a matter of listening. It's really a matter of doing. And so a lot of the stuff that you've seen on in some of the Alice in Wonderland would be a perfect example, which was the first film I had done. Just after I did Michael Jackson's This Is It tour, I did Alice in Wonderland.
That's insane.
And then another emerging field is like augmented reality and virtual reality. And I believe that's something you're currently working on. So how do you think augmented reality is going to change the film watching experience?
Well, you're going to get an answer from me that's probably not going to be the same as you get from most other people. I don't believe that virtual reality is going to find a mass market. I think it's too costly, and it's too isolated. It's an isolation type of experience.
Yeah, all your insights are so wonderful, and just hearing you talking about augmented reality and the possible future of it, it gets me really excited. You know, when you think you can't do anything else, you know, in film to make it cool, you know, there's always something out there. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. I've learned so much personally in this interview, and unfortunately, I would love to talk to you, you know, the rest of the day and hear everything, you know, you have to share, but that's gonna be it for today. And thank you so much once again for being here with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was enjoyable.
Yeah, thank you.
And please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next interview or film reviews. See you later. Bye.